This meeting is being recorded.
Go. Anybody who wants a copy can send me a copy list and I'll send you a. Hang on, I'm getting feedback. What am I getting feedback? Okay. Mr. Game. For some reason, can you hear if I got feedback here? It sounds like I got.
There's a lot of
Yeah, I have an echo. Let's cancel the. Okay, now. Oh, still got it.
I think it's Nancy's microphone.
Anybody got any ideas?
Me? What do I do here?
Nancy.
Turning on the volume.
Oh, is that Lori? Yeah. So, okay. So I have no echo. That's good.
It's good now.
Let's begin. I usually have an assistant that does this. So when you're on your own, you do the best you can. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and I welcome you back to Rabbit Holes. We had a number of rabbit holes over the years, and I decided to do another rabbit hole. A lot of the people that show up at these rabbit hole events are experiencers. That's how we sort of started it. We started with a group here in Winnipeg, the coldest major city in the world. That's where I got stuck for this life. And we had a group that started to give support to experiencers where they can, we called it Experiencers Anonymous, where they could come in, they could talk. Nobody was allowed to ask anybody why you here, what's your story. When the person was ready to talk, they could talk. They could sit in the room for 2 years and say nothing until it was time for them to realize they were part of what was going on. And then we started these rabbit hole events, and over the years, the numbers have built up. And what I decided, I wanted to have another one, and I wanted to bring in an expert on experiencers, somebody who's worked with experiencers. And that's why today I have my good friend Barbara Lamb, who is one of the top people in the world. Barbara has done literally thousands of regressions of experiencers, people who have interacted with the intelligence behind whatever this phenomena is. And I had a meeting. I'll talk a little bit about my encounter with her in Los Angeles. And I wanted to bring her in for people so they could ask questions. I've got a few questions I want to ask, but I basically want people who maybe have never been regressed, who have thought about it, who have got questions, to talk to somebody who's an authority on the subject and ask questions. So that's why I brought Barbara in. Barbara has been very good because today is the day Barbara does her regression. So she has one scheduled. We will appreciate the fact whatever time she can spend with us to answer questions. And it's all appreciated. And I really respect Barbara's work on this. And also she's done a lot of work on crop circles. So welcome, Barbara Lamb, and thank you for taking time from your valuable schedule to be with hopefully a number of experiencers who have questions for you.
Okay, well, I'm really pleased to be here. I appreciate your inviting me. And by the way, I not only do regressions on Sundays, I do them every day. Really nearly every day of the week, every week. So, there are so many people who are wondering about the peculiar things that have been happening to them. And very often they look back on their lives and they realize, gee, I think strange things started happening when I was maybe 3 or 4, and they remember various occurrences that they just couldn't explain. And so sometimes that's as little as they know when they come to me for a regression to sort of sort it out. And we always do at least an hour of talking before we actually do the regression, because people usually have nobody to talk to in their lives about these peculiar things. And that's really difficult for them. And finally, they find me or someone to talk to. And oh, it's just like all of these experiences sort of pour out, the experiences that the person has been wondering about. And then we have to sort of select from the various experiences that the person is wondering about and choose one or two for that regression. And then it's just amazing to me, time after time, how the subconscious part of the mind gets activated when the person is in a nice state of deep relaxation, which I help each person to do for the regression. And in that very deep state of relaxation, we can go back to an incident that they are wondering about. And then it all comes out in detail, moment by moment, as if the person is reliving that experience, except that this time it's not just a couple of moments that they're aware of about something really different happening, but it's the whole experience. And then it, is really known to the person. They usually feel a lot of relief, no matter what's happened in the experience. It's better to bring it up to the conscious part of the mind where we can work with it and deal with it. Whereas until the person knows what's been happening, very often they have that sort of low grade sense or even a high grade sense of being bothered by something unknown that they know has occurred, and it just doesn't make sense. And it can be, quite distressing or at least confusing. So anyway, I just so much respect the fact that there is this process of regression that we can do. And I feel very blessed to have been doing, as Grant said, thousands, probably, I don't know, probably 5,000 or 6,000 regressions now, only to the extraterrestrial experiences. And before that, I did about 6 years of past life regressions. And that's where my training
it's too loud.
was. Hi, there's somebody else here.
Everybody should mute well unless they want to ask a question.
My love, can you hide it? Okay. Nobody needs to see this.
Okay, go ahead, Barbara.
Okay, that was a surprise. Suddenly, well, isn't that interesting? It's kind of like what many people experience, that they're going along in their lives and suddenly there's a big light coming down from the sky, or suddenly, when they're sleeping, suddenly they wake up and there's at least a presence in the room that they don't understand. And sometimes they actually will see lights in the room or a beam of light coming in, or beings, a being, or maybe more than one being. And then the details start coming out. My function in regression is to keep asking questions to bring out more details. In other words, I don't put any ideas in. I just ask questions to bring details out from what the person is experiencing in the regression. And this way we just learn more and more and more every single minute. And it always seems to add up to an experience that makes some sense. I mean, once they realize what has occurred, It's like a whole vignette, a whole story that they only had momentary fragments of usually before coming for the regression. So I'm wondering how many people listening to this right now have actually looked into it and had regressions. Do you have any idea about that, Grant?
I'm not sure. People could put in the chat box. First, maybe tell us how these people can contact you, because some of the people may have had experiences. Some people may not have gone and checked it out. They're sort of wondering, should I do this? Because you know what it's like. People they hesitate. So maybe give us your contact information and then sort of answer the question for me. You've done all these regressions. Do you think everybody's always better off after they've had the regression? I was actually just listening to Paul Selleck just before I always go for a walk before I do one of these things. And actually he was talking about the fact that he talks about, what you put in darkness drags you into the darkness, and that nothing gets cured until it's brought to the light. And it's kind of weird how you would bring the same thing, that you have to bring it to the light to deal with it. So are people generally better off after they have the experience? And how would people contact you if they want to get your help in terms of trying to uncover what they may have been dealing with for years and just have put it off?
Oh, which is usually the case. And I can definitely appreciate that, because they don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. They don't know whether they really want to look into it. And then they get to a certain point when they decide, okay, it's time. I've got to find out. I'm living with this sense of wondering. Anyway, I think I will just give my website, because through the website, people can write an email to me through the website, and it'll come to me. And those emails, I get hundreds every day, probably like the rest of you. And the ones that stand out to me are the ones that say my website name. And then I know that it's somebody corresponding with me through the website. So the website is Barbara Lamb, Lamb. So Barbara Lamb Regressions.com. And regressions has an S on the end of it, plural. So Barbara Lamb Regressions.com. And then some of you might also find it interesting to look at my new YouTube channel. Wow. It's only been up for just a very few months, so I'm excited about it. And there are quite a number of interviews that I have done, and maybe a lecture or two about this subject. And so my YouTube channel, there's no cost for it to see it, is Barbara Lamb ET Regressions. YouTube, Barbara Lamb Regressions. But the better way to get in touch with me, if you'd like to, for a regression is my website, BarbaraLambRegressions.com. So, and I always welcome new people coming, and it really is astonishing to me how many millions of people in the world are having these extraterrestrial encounters. It's a really huge thing going on. And you never, as far as I know, you never hear about it in the mainstream news. And yet it's a major thing going on. And I would like to add right away that mostly, almost exclusively, what I have found in these regressions to extraterrestrial experiences is that there's always been not only something interesting that has happened for the person being regressed, but often there is a benefit to having had these abductions. There are so many cases where a person has been taught and trained specific skills or encouraged in the work that they are here in the world to do, that the person is here to do. There have been more and more cases of that sort of thing coming to me. And often, if there's something wrong with the person's physical body, they will be healed. And very often they are healed right then and there while on the craft with the extraterrestrial beings. And I've also known of many cases where after a physical exam on the craft, which the person usually does not really like, but anyway, it turns out to be very useful often. After the physical exam, the being sometimes will say to the person, be sure to see your doctor when you go back to Earth, because there is something wrong. We detect a problem in your pancreas or your liver or your kidneys or whatever, wherever the problem is. And you need to have that taken care of. So be sure to alert your doctor about that. So that's even a very, very useful thing that goes on. And then, of course, there's a whole reproductive program that some of the species do, not all of them. And so many women and many men come to realize that they have hybrid children whom they had not consciously known about in most cases. And that's a whole huge subject in itself. And then, of course, we have ET human hybrids who are living here on Earth. And these are people who are looking perfectly human and acting perfectly human, and they are born here, but either before conception or during life in the mother's womb, they have been given extraterrestrial genetics, usually from more than one species. Could be 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 different species of extraterrestrials who contribute their DNA to the embryo or the fetus if it's already in the womb. So that is a whole very fascinating subject and a very important thing going on. I think we have a large number of ET human hybrids living here with us. And as far as I know about all of that, those hybrids who are living here as one of us, they are here totally for service. They're not here for their own reasons. They're here to help raise the consciousness of humanity. And so they do all kinds of things like healing of other people, healing of animals, teaching courses and workshops and working individually with people and teaching meditation and Reiki, and a lot of them do Reiki healing themselves. Anyway, they're doing everything they can to raise awareness about life in the universe, and particularly to help to raise the consciousness of humanity. So we've got hybrids who are not human enough to be here, and they live on the ships. And then there's another group of hybrids who are mostly human with some extraterrestrial genetics, and they are here living and serving on Earth. I think that a lot of people who experience these things have not been aware of that part of it. And some of you people could possibly be a hybrid yourself. And to be a hybrid living here, in my opinion, is a really wonderful thing. I mean, thank you for coming here and having a lifetime of service. That is great. And then some people are coming to me, particularly these more recent years. People are coming to me not for extraterrestrial reasons, but to find out the real purpose why they came into this life. So very often a person will get to be in his or her 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, and finally come to the grips with the fact that they wonder why they're really here. They kind of sense that there is a particular purpose rather than having a regular job and having a marriage often, or having children and then maybe grandchildren. But many people feel like, there's something else that I feel that I am here on earth in this life to do. And that comes out in the regressions when that is what a person wants, which is a wonderful thing. In other words, in that case, instead of going into a past event, we go into the person's higher knowing, their higher self, their soul. There are different ways that we could say that, but that source of really knowing why they came in to this lifetime. And that always is very, very rewarding and very appreciated by those people who are seeking that. And I still do some past life regressions here and there, which are always very interesting. And the past life regressions that I do always seem to have a bearing on this life. Something gets carried over from a particular past life and is influencing this life. And that can be very helpful to know about as well, and to answer a lot of questions in many cases. Well, I wonder if there are any questions that anybody would like to ask.
Let me ask one, and I'm not watching the chat here, but people can put them in the chat or just unmute yourself. But I have a couple of questions I still want to go through. I remember you talking one time about the fact that how it started for you, that you talked about this thing about mission. And what I've found with experiencers that I've met is a lot of times they go from victim to messiah. It's a terrible thing. And then suddenly, once they tell their story, you can't shut them up. Then they want to tell everybody, and they believe they have this mission on earth. But you had your own little experience where you're taking regression training. I remember, can you tell that story about you're taking regression training and you hear the voice in your head? Can you tell that story?
Thank you. I was thinking about that just this morning, getting ready. Yes, well, this was a remarkable moment for me. I was taking 5 years of training to be a past life regression therapist. And this was in the 1980s, starting in 1984. And at the very last module of training, which was in 1988, the woman who was doing our training, she was our trainer, and a woman I respected enormously. So, I paid attention to what she was saying. She said, those of you who are doing regression therapy need to know that it could happen sometime that somebody will come to you having had really unusual experiences or visitations and in this life, and they don't know what to make of it, and they might want to do a regression to find out more. So she said that she didn't use the word alien or extraterrestrial or UFOs or anything like that. She just said people sometimes have very unusual visitors who are not really human come suddenly appear to them and maybe take them away for a while. So she didn't use the words that are very common since then, like alien, extraterrestrial, UFOs, none of that. So, but what she said, really got my attention. And I thought, I've never heard of anything like this before. And so I was having that, sort of cognitive dissonance with what I thought was reality, sort of suddenly collided with a whole new aspect. And so right then, so that was astonishing enough. But right then, after she said that, I heard this big voice in my head saying, pay attention to this, Barbara. You will be doing this. Almost like somebody was pointing their finger at me. Well, I just was completely astonished. I was so shocked about this whole new thing that I never, even in the 5 days of training that followed those moments, I never even asked that trainer again about it. I just was stunned. And we went on with the past life regression therapy training. But I did find that after that, without consciously deciding to do this, I found that whenever I was out doing an errand, I would steer my car after accomplishing the errand. I'd steer my car over to a bookstore or a magazine shop. We used to have magazine shops. I don't know if we do anymore, but too bad. That was a very rich resource. And looking for magazines that might have something about those other visitors. And I came to realize that, oh, there were names for those. They were extraterrestrials or aliens, and that they came in UFOs. So for 3 years, I went to, I can't tell you how many bookstores and magazine shops. And I was going to England every year anyway, and looking in these wonderful bookstores that had lots of old books, and found some UFO books. And once in a great while, I would run into some information about abductions. And so I was sort of getting the sense that, oh, okay, yeah, there really is some reality to this, that at least some people, other than my trainer, are acknowledging. And then in 1991, one day when I was taking a shower, good free thinking time, like your walks, Grant, I think,
exactly.
by taking a shower, just open thought and not focusing on anything in particular. And so that one day I had the thought, oh, if anybody would ever come to me to be regressed for reasons of those sort of unusual extraterrestrial visits, I think I could handle that. Yeah, because I've done a lot of past life regressions up to this point for 6 years now. And so I could use the same methods, just that we wouldn't go into a past life. We'd go back to whatever the experience is that the person would be wondering about. So 2 hours after having that thought in the shower, I was in a metaphysical bookstore and not thinking anything more about the ET subject. But the woman behind the counter recognized me as somebody who did regression work. And she said, oh, would you please work with my daughter, my 21-year-old daughter? She is having these visits at night, and it's just driving her wild, and she's terrified, and she's sleeping between me and my husband every night. And because she's just so shocked and so frightened, and she really, really needs help. Would you please work with her? So I did 6 regressions with her, each one to a different extraterrestrial experience and to a different species of extraterrestrials each time. And after 6 sessions, she realized that she was no longer afraid, and she and her boyfriend were going to be moving to a little cabin out in the wilderness behind where we all lived. And she was not afraid anymore. She just thought it would be just fine if they continued to come, because she had been healed 2 different times by different extraterrestrials. One was of an ear infection that she was healed right there in her own bed at home. And another was running through a field, running away from a UFO overhead and a big blue beam of light coming down to her. And it struck her in her lower back, the beam of light, and it healed a long-term back injury that she had had. And so she realized, as peculiar as they are, and as scary looking as some of them are, they really have been helping me. And so she went on with her life feeling ever so much more relaxed about the fact that she was having these encounters. So that was great. And I thought, after working with her, I thought, well, if anybody else comes for this reason, good, that I know that I can be helpful. I know I can work effectively with this. And then just a few months later, another woman came. And then a month or so after that, another one and another one and another one. So there were about 5 people in that one year, 1991. And by that time, I was feeling more and more confident about how useful this work could be, and more engaged in it and fascinated by it. And then it has just developed since then. And there really have been, at least 3,000 people who've come for regression. It's probably 4,000 by now. And some of them, particularly in the 1990s, several of them came for quite a number of regressions. They happened to live close to me. And that is within an hour of where I was in Southern California. And so one woman probably came for 50 or 60 regressions over a period of about 11 or 12 years. And so it's been a lot more regressions that I've done in addition to just the number of people. But and they keep coming. So it is wonderful. So it's really very fortunate that during all these years, the whole computer world developed, and we have things like Zoom and Skype and even FaceTime on our phones, and StreamYard. There probably are other formats too. So that means that people are coming online for a regression from all over the US and even from many other countries. So I think that we are very, very fortunate that we have the ability to do this, and this is acceptable for almost everyone. And the online sessions are very, very effective. I think they're just as effective as coming here in person, which some people do. I'm in San Diego, California, and sometimes people will come from a great distance, to have a few days of vacation in San Diego. It's a very nice place to be. And the real thing that brings them here is to do a regression, or sometimes more than one regression, if they're going to be here for a couple of days. So it's really great. And again, I would like to know if anybody has any comments or questions, or just sharing about your own experience.
We have a question here about trauma. You just went through trauma. Do you I guess you run into it quite a bit when people
Yes.
first have it, and are you able to deal with it every time? Are you able to deal? Because if you've seen, I posted your the interview coming up on Facebook, and of course you get the comments where people say, you know, you should talk to my daughter and my son and these terrible aliens, and they're traumatizing people. And you hear that, and I think you were involved with Ray Hernandez with the Free Foundation with the initial study, where
Right.
83% of people say, if you were to stop it, would you stop it? They say no, just keep it going, don't stop it. But there is that small percentage. So, I mean, are these people who really have not had regressions, or how do you deal with people who are sort of have this backlash that, you know, you can say all the positive things you want, and they're up to no good, and they're traumatizing people. How do you deal with that kind of material? Is it just a regression that gets you past that to realize what's actually going on? That you're talking to your higher self rather than your little ego mind that's sort of, you know, in fear and talking, where you try to get into that higher mind that will tell you what's actually going on?
Well, wow, that's a whole bunch of questions right there. Good old Grant. Your mind is just going a mile a minute, as always. First of all, I really understand why people are frightened. I'm sure I would be too if I didn't know anything about it, and suddenly there are these odd-looking beings there, and having a sense of being taken away, and so often what we don't know is much more frightening than what we do know. In other words, if a stranger suddenly approaches us in our home or on the street, and we don't know what to expect, and we sense something really different about that person, we feel fear. We absolutely feel fear, and we feel negative. So especially with extraterrestrial beings, I think the normal response would be to be afraid of them, you know, because it's so unknown. We have no idea what they are, what they're like, what they do to us. If we sense that we're being taken away, that's even more frightening. And so I totally understand that. And I understand people being traumatized by this too. So if the person is in the experience, I think it seems to be helpful that I keep calm about it as I'm saying things like, what are you aware of now? Well, what's happening this next moment? Or what do you see? If there's somebody there, how many somebodies are there? We'll take a good look at them, see what they look like. So in other words, I keep asking details to bring out more from their awareness. They tune in more with my questions. And I am very careful not to put in any suggestions or any of my own ideas, just simply to bring out what's going on for them moment by moment. And it's a sense of, the person has the sense of reliving that experience that they've known so little about. And they relive it moment by moment by moment. And then it all adds up to a picture. So if somebody in the regression experience is experiencing something that's very distasteful or traumatic even for them, I say, well, it's going to be helpful for you to know what happened, but you don't have to go through every moment of feeling it. So if you want to, you can just leave your body, which we all have the ability to do. Just go over to the side or go above and watch what's happening to your body. And then when you feel comfortable enough, go back into your body. So I used to do that quite a lot back in the 1990s. And it just seems like in the years since then, maybe because more people are knowing about these ET abductions, people are not seeming to need that kind of help. But if they do experience any kind of trauma, I assure them that, number one, I am right there with them as they are reliving this experience. They're not alone, and they will understand it more later, and they will be returned and go on with the rest of their lives. Sometimes people just simply need to be reminded about that, because it might seem like, I'm really jeopardized here. I might die. But I assure them that they will be returned and they will go on with the rest of their life. And that seems to be a quieting effect on them, and then they can go through the rest of the regression. And afterwards, people usually make comments, and we talk about it for a few minutes, sort of debrief the whole experience before our session is through. And they have a chance to express their feelings about whatever it was that happened and kind of integrate it into their lives and realize that however dramatic or traumatic the experience might have been, that it's more acceptable now, more livable with now that they know what happened, rather than fearing dreadful things that were unknown. So I totally feel that the whole process is very helpful, no matter what has happened.
Now, we have a question about other phenomena, but related to what you were talking about just now, I had a question that I initially wanted to ask you, and that was, you and I and Ray Hernandez were sitting in LA, we're going for lunch, and you said something that I'd never heard before, and I want you to sort of elaborate on this, that I was just blown away. The power of the regression is, you talked about how you distract people during a regression, where you actually, I think the example you used was, who's standing beside you? I don't know. Well, take a look. And you actually talk about the fact that people actually do things that they didn't do when it initially took place, that it's a live scene, like you're actually going back in real time and you're having these events. And then you, like, I remember the one you said to them, well, what are they doing? I don't know. Well, ask them. Well, they're looking at my kidney. And that probably didn't happen in the first regression. Can you talk a little bit about that, where the fact that you can actually talk to the beings, or the beings want to talk to you, that you have these events where it's actually happening like in real time. It's not some sort of memory that you're reliving. They're actually back in the event.
Yes. Well, to go to your first question there, I find it's very, very helpful when the person is, let's say, lying on a cold, hard medical table in an unusual environment with unusual beings. That's, of course, a very disquieting situation. And so I find that it is very, very helpful if I keep asking questions about the details about what's right there with them. In other words, they're usually feeling cold physically, and they're usually frightened, and they usually cannot move as they're lying on the table. So, of course, that is not a favorable situation that anybody would want. So I just start asking them, okay, well, is there anybody there with you? And they'll say, yes. And I'll say, well, where are they? And they said, well, I've got one down by my feet. I've got one in the back of my head. I've got one over to the right. I've got two over to the left. And I'll say, well, just take a look at those. And what do they look like? And they'll describe them. And I realize that they're describing extraterrestrial beings. And I'll say, well, how tall or short are they in relation to you lying on the table? And, I'll ask many questions like, what are their eyes looking like? And do they have any clothing on? And, just to get more and more details about the beings. And as this is happening for the person, they're really looking and thinking and talking about these beings, it seems to help them to be not as focused on whatever they consider weird things going on for them. And then we get more and more of a sense of the whole setting and the beings and the procedures. And then very often the person on a medical table is being examined in some way, kind of like our medical examinations, maybe a little bit different, or instrumentation is different. And it doesn't necessarily make sense to the person. So I will say to the person, would you like to know what they're doing or why they're doing this particular thing? And the person usually says yes. And I say, well, you can ask them to tell you what they're doing. And usually they do respond, they do tell you. And I say, you can ask out loud with your words, or you can ask it simply in your mind. Usually they choose to just ask the question in their minds, I've noticed. And then they get an answer. So they'll ask the question in silence. And then a few seconds later, they say, oh, they're saying that I have something different about my blood, a different blood disorder that most people don't have. And they're checking into that, and they're helping to rectify whatever is going wrong, or whatever the thing is that the beings are finding. Or maybe they find out that they're simply and wonderfully being healed of some physical condition that they have. And so that's a really wonderful thing too. And sometimes the beings will say more about that. Sometimes, usually they'll mention which part of the body they are working on and healing. And sometimes they even give suggestions for how the person can help himself at home, in ongoing life at home, like certain nutrients that would be helpful, or certain habits to give up in some cases. So it's kind of like a holistic medical exam experience, with very often the component of healing happening right then and there. So let's see, I know there was another part of
like I've had experiences, past messages from beings. Chris Bledsoe had one from the guardians for me. So do you get messages from the beings
yes,
where they contact you, where you're actually interacting with the beings and you're part of the process? Or Barbara's back, here's Barbara again, or
no. That's so cute. I've never had anybody say that. But they very often, okay, they're talking to the person. Now here it is. The person being regressed is reporting what the beings are saying to him or her. And then they'll say, oh, now they have a message for you, Barbara. Or the beings will just, they're talking to the client, but they won't necessarily, this is for you, Barbara. Sometimes they do, but sometimes it's just obvious that they're addressing me and not the person. And so these are not long messages. It's not like a long channeling. It usually would be a fairly brief message, just for a minute or two or three. But the messages most often have been that they appreciate that this person happens to be helping that person to know what's going on and to know the intent of the beings. And some of them will go further and say, we really appreciate that you let other people in the world know about this, because they have been so unaware of this part of reality that we all exist. Millions of us exist, and that we are very, very interested in humanity and planet Earth. You know, they sometimes will say things like that. And so basically, they're saying, thank you. Thank you for letting people know about this. People do need to know about this. And so that's always very gratifying. Everything that has ever been said during a regression by an extraterrestrial to me has been very supportive of what I am spending my life doing. And that's very nice. That's one of the good reasons to keep going with this.
Yeah, you're doing a wonderful job. And you mentioned before the idea that it sort of gets ignored. One of the other reasons I wanted to have you on was that I always say that if you want to know what's going on with what's behind the UFO phenomena, you got to talk to the people who are dealing with the intelligence. And if you look at Congress right now, a lot of people don't know Congress is not going to touch this issue. And a lot of people don't know that a lot of major film people in the UFO field will not touch experiencer stuff because they figure this will make them look bad. They just stick with the UFO stories. And with the Congress thing, all they're interested in is the metal. Can we get a hold of this metal? Because we can build something, we can make patents, we can make some money from this, that they really aren't interested in knowing what's actually going on. They're more interested in these, it all has to do with money. So I do appreciate the fact that you are here, and that if people want to know what's going on, you've got to talk to the people who are interacting with the phenomena.
Absolutely. Yes. I know. I look at the whole UFO phenomenon that's discussed by the government, as important, yes, but so superficial compared to what people are really experiencing.
Yeah. That's why I always say to people, like, people have maybe, I think it's $10,000 for the average Super Bowl ticket. And people say, I went to the Super Bowl once. And it's like, you and I get to not only go to the Super Bowl, we're in the Super Bowl every single day. We're there. Like, I mean, what more could you ask for out of life is to live this life of this interesting stories and how reality actually works. Let's go to some anonymous questions. We're getting behind the questions here. There's an anonymous question talking about other related phenomena that people think might be related, like synchronicities, waking up from sleep, knowing unusual thoughts that get confirmation sometimes within minutes, sometimes days, or people that will come to me and say, I don't really know if I've been abducted. I just see them in my dreams. How do you deal with that? Was that all going to go back to the same thing where you're just not really picking up what's actually going on?
Well, I like to dive in about the dreams. So many people come to me talking about their dreams. And in that hour or so of our talking before we get into a real regression, the people usually have 2 or 3 very, very vivid dreams about beings or about traveling in space or about being in some other unusual environment, and they don't know how they got there, and things of that sort. So many of the dreams, if we do a regression to a vivid dream, which happens quite often, it turns out that it wasn't a dream. It was an actual experience. And they would get glimpses of it in what seems like a dream, because after all, they're in bed at night and they're sleeping. So when they wake up, or I would say come to again, and they're aware of something just having happened, and they assume it's a dream. But very often, if it's been a really vivid dream, and they will say that it seems so real, but it must have been a dream. That's very typical. Anyway, sometimes we do a regression to one of those quote unquote dreams, And it certainly turns out to be, as far as we can tell, a real experience. And then sometimes there's a dream that sort of lets the person know from the person's own subconscious part of the mind, lets them know, gives them hints that something like this is going on. So the dream may not be the actual experience, but it might be like a warning from the subconscious part of the mind. Hey, open up to these ideas because you are having these things happen.
Yeah, the next question, we're going to bring April to open up here, but I just want to make a cut. She wants to ask about doors, but I just want to bring this up because I found it so fascinating. You regressed Mike Cleland, and Mike Cleland, of course, is the owl guy, and he spent his entire life with these symbols of owls. And when he was regressed, not by you, you regressed him, but in one of his other regressions, he said, ask me about the owls. And then when they asked him about the owls, they said, the owls are not important. The owls don't mean anything. The owl is just a symbol. The owl is tacked to a door. It's the door that's important. When you get attracted to the door and then you open the door and you see what's behind the door, this unbelievable universe that's magnificent or whatever. So April has a question about doors. Can you unmute April and ask your question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, yes. Hi, April.
So about 5 years ago, I had an incident and someone suggested I go to see what happened and go through hypnotherapy or see a hypnotist. So I went to another town and I met this person and he's very professional. And he regressed me. And the procedure was to go down these stairs and there's a door and open the door. And when I got down to the stairs, I saw 3 doors. There was 3 doors. And I said, well, which door? And he said, there's only 1 door. And I was like, oh, brother.
So no, there are 3. Yeah.
So I just picked one, right? And went through the experience and everything. And it was really powerful. But I'm still wondering about the other 2 doors.
Oh, that's so cute, really. I appreciate that. Well, first of all, what that hypnotherapist was doing was what we call an induction. That's the relaxation part to get the person into the experience. That's one of many, many inductions that people can do. And I do not do that myself. I prefer to do an induction that is simply relaxing all parts of the body and allowing the breathing to be longer and slower and deeper. And it really gets the person into a very, very nice relaxed state. And then I say, I'm going to be counting from number 10 down to number 1. And when we get down to number 1, we're going to be in that experience that seemed to be a dream, or back to that time you were driving along in the road and then you saw a big light in the sky and your car motor stopped and you pulled over and you didn't know anything for a couple of hours when you were back in the car again. Whatever the presenting incident was. And then we go from there, then it opens up. So the door thing is just a metaphor to get you examined. But I would like to say that in your experience of that, April, you saw 3 doors. So that might be suggesting that there are 3 other experiences that would be helpful for you to know about. And when you consider that the 3 doors came up from your mind, not the hypnotherapist's mind, but your mind, it's a way of your subconscious telling you, okay, open 1 door, you'll find out about 1 experience, but there are a couple others you really need to check too.
Can I share something else?
Sure.
After the regression, I was really unstable and I couldn't even write a check. I wasn't coherent, and I could see through things. Like I saw there was a Kleenex box. And I said, "Oh, there's a spider inside that Kleenex box," and it was. So I don't think it was a really positive experience for me, because I think I'm still kind of recovering from that whole thing. You know, I don't know.
Wait, how long ago was your regression to that experience?
Pardon?
How long ago was that, your regression?
5 years ago.
5 years ago. So that's considerable period of time. Yeah. And are you remembering what you experienced in that regression?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, it was, yeah. I really can't talk about it, but
No, you don't have to. You don't have to. Right.
it didn't involve aliens anyway. So that was the interesting part. I thought it was, but it wasn't. No.
Yeah, it did not involve aliens?
I thought it did, but it didn't. No.
Oh, okay. You know, there are so many things that can happen to us, even from other humans.
Yeah.
That, you know, sometimes it gets confusing. I personally think that most, underlined most, of the beings who have anything to do with human beings, that most of them have decent intent, even if they seem to be a little bit more cold-hearted, like some of the little gray aliens are known by many people to not be caring and loving and compassionate, but to be, you know, just very interested in what they're doing, their medical exams or whatever they're doing. They seem to be more self-serving, more interested in their own research, you know, rather than caring about humans. I don't think that they or many of the less favorable types are out to really harm us, although it can seem like it, because we can easily feel victimized by these things, understandably. But I in all the work that I've done anyway, I don't think that they're out to really, you know, torture us or make us miserable or hurt us or harm us or kill us. Although it can seem like, oh, maybe that's going to happen, you know, as we begin to really, there are unusual beings there. But some of them are really very, very benevolent and do a lot to try to help humanity and do a lot to help the individuals whom are taken to be with them. And I think that part usually doesn't get out into public notice as much as the scary parts.
Yeah.
I think
we're gonna go to Philip right now, but I want to just follow up on that. I mean, that's why I think it's important for people like you to be speaking out, because it's not like a person may have an experience, they really don't understand it, it's kind of weird, they think it's kind of bad, but you've got thousands of experiences. You can look across and see not just one experience, all the data, and make a conclusion that you see this as very sort of positive as to what's going on, rather than these sort of one or two fearful stories that people will promote.
Right. And you know what? Our world, it just gobbles up fear.
Yeah, it sells. Yeah.
You know, and it's promoted. It's deliberately, I think, you know, put into movies and television shows and all kinds of things, books, and there's something about humanity that many people just eat that stuff up.
Yeah. You see that when you go to Contact in the Desert or to Consciousness Life Expo, you have the regression session and you have 30 or 40 people, and then across the hall is some fear thing, and it's like 600 people and you can't get in the room. And it's like,
Right.
fear does sell. People love to you know, the fear. Philip, you're up next. Do you want to ask your question? Can you unmute?
I didn't want to talk, Grant.
There you go. Well,
That's okay.
I think she wants to actually go face to face with people here. So go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah, you can ask a question. You don't have to say anything about you if you don't want.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. I just had as a child, I had a lot of experiences with, like, you know, laying in bed at night and, you know, having like my hair pulled, or, you know, having the covers pulled off, or,
Yeah.
you know, and things like that. There was an episode when I was probably 6 where I disappeared from my mom for maybe like a half hour, but I thought it was like 3 minutes. But then again, I was 6, so I don't know if I measured time correctly then or not. But I was just curious if, through your research, if you found a correlation between people who have, you know, had an abduction experience, or however you want to describe it, and other paranormal phenomena like, you know, ghost or astral projection or things like that.
Oh, great question. Yes, there is a correlation for many, many people, not everybody, but yeah, in fact, a lot of people who are having these abduction experiences realize after a while that they are more psychic than they used to be. You know, that maybe they weren't particularly psychic, but as these experiences continue through some years, they realize, wow, like the lady just before said she could see through the Kleenex box, you know, and sometimes those abilities last for the rest of the person's life. So very often people are taught psychic skills when they're having one of these abduction experiences. And sometimes they're taught how to heal other people. And they come back with healing ability that they had not realized that they had. And then often having these experiences does go with noticing a lot of synchronicities that are happening in everyday life, and peculiar things, maybe knowing something is going to happen and then it does happen. I mean, I think a lot of people find that and they wonder, how did I know that? And so I see the beings have all kinds of ways of affecting us, including in some of those other paranormal ways. And then people who see these other beings sometimes at home in their room, they sometimes will see into other dimensions, it seems. Like they'll see a deceased person that they've known. We could call that a ghost, or I prefer to call it a spirit visitation. But yeah, that was a really great question, because I think a lot of these other aspects happen to people, or to some of the people anyway, who are having abductions, and some of the skills that people have are either taught by the beings or encouraged if the person already has some latent ability for some of these paranormal skills, that often that's brought out and enhanced in the person by the beings.
Beautiful. You're going to love the next question. The next question is from my friend Nancy Tremaine, and she actually is a person I encouraged her to put her book out. We helped her publish her first book. I wrote a foreword to her second book, and she was taken two months before Betty and Barney Hill in 1961. And she's got a question, and you'll love the question. Nancy, are you there? Can you unmute and ask your question?
Yes. Oh, I am so excited to be talking to you, Barbara.
Nancy,
Thank you.
We met years ago.
You know, I wrote to you when I first awakened in around 2011, 12, and I've loved you ever since. I remembered
Thank you.
you I'm so excited to be talking to you. You are so eloquent and beautiful. I just love this. You had spoken about an experience you had with a reptilian, a shorter reptilian that always, you know, I really needed that and appreciated to hear you speaking those words, especially when I have a family that thinks I'm in a cult. So would you address and talk about that?
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway,
I'm hearing a big echo. I don't know if that is anybody else heard my voice.
My voice.
Oh, no, you're not echoing. Am I echoing?
No, you're not.
No, you're not.
Oh,
I didn't know I had
know I
that
had
ability.
Nancy, Nancy, can you mute? To see if that makes a difference.
oh, maybe I should mute. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I still hear it. Well, anyway, talk about the reptilian. I had heard many reports about reptilians, starting in 1991. And I had a very negative impression about them. And oh, good, the echo's gone. So I had always been thinking about them as being really big, like 7 feet tall, and very muscly and big and buff and arrogant and, superior acting and all of that. So it was not really what you'd call a great impression, not a favorable one. But anyway, let's see, when was this? Early in the 2000s. So I had already been doing probably 12 or 13 or so years of this regression work. And one afternoon, there was nobody else in the house, and I was walking from my study to go through the living room to another part of the house. And when I entered the living room, there in front of me, right in the middle of the living room, was standing a reptilian being, a male. I had a distinct impression that this was a male reptilian being. And I want to say that in the living room, there was a big corner window, and I had loads of sunlight coming in. So, I was really seeing clearly. And so I was, of course, surprised that there was somebody there, and even more surprised that it was a reptilian someone there, and even more surprised that I liked him. He just seemed like such a good guy. And the whole thing was just dazzling. And I had such a feeling of liking for him, that he seemed so friendly and so safe, that I went right over to him, and he had his hand out in a handshake position. And I took his hand. So we were standing there holding hands. And he was really very close to me. His face was probably a foot in front of mine or so. And we just stood there for a few minutes holding hands, and with my looking at him, and he telepathically was talking to me. I don't think I said anything to him, although he was probably reading my mind. And but he was talking telepathically, and I could pick that up, which, by the way, is very interesting, because it means that we humans have telepathic ability, but we just have not known that. But I picked up everything he said very, very clearly. And he said that he was there to give me my own vivid experience when I was conscious, awake, and in the light of day, which there was plenty of light, as I say, coming in. And he said he had been sent as a special ambassador, a friendly ambassador. He said he had been bred to be a special friendly ambassador who would come to Earth and validate for people who experienced extraterrestrial contacts to validate that this is really true. They're not out of their minds, that these are real things that happen, even though most people don't know about it. So he said, we know that you, talking to me specifically, that you, Barbara, are totally open and accepting the truth of experiences when you are working with a person. And we know that you totally believe them. You're convinced of the truth of it. And we also know that when you are away for a month or so, like I was every year for researching crop circles in England, and I've had many other trips to other parts of the world. So when you're away for 3 or 4 weeks and you're completely absorbed in whatever you're aware of where you're visiting, that you occasionally have the thought, thinking back on all of this regression work with beings from elsewhere, that you occasionally have the thought, oh, I wonder if that could really be true. And then you go back involved in whatever you're doing, wherever you are. And when you come back again and work with the next person, you're reconvinced again. But because you have had those once in a great while doubts, I have been sent to let you know that this is a true phenomenon, that beings from elsewhere really do come. He never used the word ET or aliens. He said beings from elsewhere. Used that phrase about 4 or 5 times. And so here I am, and you can feel me, you can touch me, you can see me, you can feel my energy. You know that I am really, really here. And indeed, I was totally convinced that he was right there. And then he went on to talk about how he and others like him once in a while will validate somebody's experiences by appearing behind them and then slowly coming up, like when the person's looking in a mirror, either in the car, it could happen with the rear view mirror, or in their own bathroom mirror. They'll come up behind the person just until the person will see one of them, and then they disappear. And so he said but there's been that validation, even though it was just for a moment, validation for the person when the person is awake and conscious. And so I thought that was interesting. I had never heard that before or since. So he said that's why he was here for me, so that I would have absolutely no doubt from then on. And then when he was through saying all that, just suddenly he was gone. And I was left with my hand up, in the handshake position. So they have a way of coming into our dimension and popping out, and it's very, very quick. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for asking that question, because that gives me the opportunity to share it. And I do remember meeting you at a conference years ago, and always hoped that we would have something further to do with each other.
Yeah, thank you to Nancy for writing the book. Nancy is one of the few people that I've come across who really got some backlash from what she did. I mean, to stand up and still maintain the story, and her encounters with Mr. This reptilian, and she's written 2 books about it. I suggest people look her up on Amazon.com, and to have stood ground and not backed off the story after all these years, because she took more flack than I think anybody I've ever seen in terms of putting her story out and standing with it. So, so I think it means a lot that she gets to talk to you, that you confirm that this is for real, that you've had encounters, yes, similar encounters as well.
Oh,
the
yes.
next person I want to ask for a question is somebody who should write a book, and that's Candace from Colorado. Candace, you want to unmute and ask your question? Candace was one of Bud Hopkins' early people. Is
Oh,
Candace there?
Great.
Coming.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi. We met many years ago when you came to speak for us in Boulder. And
Yes.
yeah, and so the question I have has to do with AI. We had Cynthia Sue Larson came, and she shared about an experience she'd had many years ago where she actually was in the future. she had the ETs gave her an experience of a future life, like 500 years in the future. And in that time, she was part AI herself.
Oh yeah.
And that there were a number of people like that, but mostly humanity was dominated by AI. And so she said that what had happened was she agreed to come back to this time to prevent the domination of AI in the future.
Good.
Really interesting. And she said that, of course, the question was, did you accomplish the mission? And she said that she had, but what I'm hearing from a lot of scientists and people today is that we're in danger. We're in great danger from AI becoming too advanced. Right. So I just, and also that there was a prediction of singularity taking place by 2029. I think, I don't know who Ray Kurzweil or somebody possibly, but the idea is that this is not, 100 years away. It's like 10 years away. It's like coming very, very quickly because of the rapid advancement. So I just wondered if you had any information, if any of the contactees that you had been speaking with were bringing any new information or any information about that.
No, I wouldn't say that they have, but here's something that is alarming to me, is that we, just from the worldly point of view, it's come to my attention that there are those beings and people and forces, groups that are wanting to make us all be transhumans, to be partly AI. And then there are theories that there are plans, I've heard, I don't know how true this is, that there are definite plans to make us be more AI ourselves, and not only to develop AI as separate instruments or beings, shall we say, but to convert us humans into AI as much as possible. And I mean, that would just fundamentally change the whole human race. So there are theories that even the vaccines that people have been getting in the last 2 and 3 years have that technology in them. They already have AI technology in them that is already affecting the millions of people who have taken that vaccine. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, how true that is, but I've heard that reported in 4 or 5 different sources. So I think there's a possibility that that is accurate. So it may already be underway, but then not everybody has taken the vaccine. So those people would not be affected in that way.
So by vaccine, are you talking about the COVID vaccine?
Right.
So that you're saying that the transhumanism, the people who are into transhumanism are being affected if they took the vaccine or if they didn't?
If they did. because it was in the vaccine.
Oh, I see. Yeah, the nano. Right. I did hear that theory.
And that's from people who have really researched and analyzed what has gone into those particular vaccines. Now, not everybody who's been shot has had that particular ingredient in the vaccine. Apparently, there were a lot of injections that were given, according to these other sources. It's not my research. That many people who had the injections that did not have that component, but many other people did have that. So it may be, already starting a transhumanism.
Okay.
Well, this is kind of in line with what she was sharing, and that she said, at that particular time, she had to escape the whole place and come back. But just would love to hear anything that you come into contact with in the future. If you share that through your sites or whatever.
Right. And it's not my work. These are reports from other people's work. So that's why I'm just saying.
I was just speaking more about contactees. If you get any information from contactees that you might pass on, would be awesome. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, then I would, be more public about that part if I get it from the experiencers.
Okay, let's go to Jeff in Chicago. Jeff is famous for orbs. I don't know if you've had any experience with orbs. He has hundreds of thousands of photographs, and like the UFO experiencers, orbs are being totally ignored. So Jeff, how many photographs do you have now, and what's your question?
I've got maybe 250,000 or so, but
250,000.
Yeah, too many.
Wow.
But great to meet you. I just had a question. If do you ever work with folks who don't necessarily feel like they've, or there's a specific past experience that they can sort of go to, but instead feel like there's a soul group or presence with them that's sort of like preparing them for a future experience? So I guess is a past experience always part of it?
No, it doesn't have to be. No, I think more and more people are sort of coming forth with unusual things of that sort that you're talking about. I mean, there are all kinds of awarenesses that certain people have, and any of that is able to be looked at in regression. So regression doesn't have to be going to some specific past event. But I mean, it could be like some people will come and they get messages from, they don't know where exactly, but they get messages in their own minds. Some of them get so much of that they'll sit down and do automatic writing, or they'll do channeling, or sometimes they just get messages and that's it. And the messages always seem to have some meaning for them, or sometimes meaning about the larger reality. And so they will come for a regression to find out more about that. Like, what is it they're supposed to be knowing? And so in that kind of a regression, we just ask the authors of that information, the ones who are sending the messages, to be present and to let us know what's going on and what the person needs to be knowing. So that certainly is effective too. And like for you yourself, if you would ever wonder about why is it that you have thousands of pictures of orbs? You know, why is it that you in particular are so tuned in to either seeing orbs or knowing when to take a picture because there will be orbs in it? You know, that's a special sense that you have. And there probably is a reason for that. And if you wanted to do a regression to find out more about that, like, why is this happening to me? It could open up into something really wonderful. In my opinion, wonderful, probably yours too. You know, there's probably a much bigger picture going on here for you that you may not be consciously aware of.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really exceptional and notable, wonderful that you're so aware of the orbs and can actually capture that so that other people can see them.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And
he does have some of the most spectacular photos you've ever seen. And we did a couple of interviews with him, but it's just unbelievable what he can get. And you can actually be in a group where people getting nothing. And then I remember we were at a C5 event in Illinois, and I immediately went to Jeff and I said, "What'd you get?" And he's like, "Oh, I got this and this and all these photographs." And he was one of the people who was getting photographs. Everybody else was sitting in the same circle taking photographs, and he got stuff that nobody else was picking up. So it's
right. Well, you see, it could be that you have sort of an interdimensional vision, that you can see the things that are really here around us all the time that most of us don't see. But you may have that particular kind of vision. And I would take a guess that there's more to this than meets the eye. In other words, you're more in tune with other dimensional reality than most of us are.
Beautiful. So Jeff, if you do the regression, come back and let's do an interview and we'll find out what you're really up to.
Yeah, we'll do. Would love to.
Okay. Staying in Chicago, my friend Jan Yonder is here. I met him at Mount Shasta. We had a bunch of events there. He goes to Mount Shasta quite often for events there. And he was actually there and brought me the story for 2020 of 9 people levitated in a circle, all holding hands, oming, and surrounded by more beings than there was trees in the forest. He wasn't involved. He wasn't one of the 9 people, but he was there when all this happened. And he brought me the story. Are you there, Jan?
I am. Thank you very much. It's
wow.
Very nice
to hear about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's an honor to speak with you. Yeah, that experience was with a group of people that were of Hispanic descent with the Rama group, and they had a very long, bizarre way of coming together. It was 2 women and 1 man, and the group spoke Spanish, with the exception of the gentleman. And they had been pulled together through a very, very elaborate series of things where they had traveled together and done some energy work in Arizona. And they had been they shared this series of events through a group in Canada, an experiencer group in Canada. And through that is how I heard about them. And I just knew they were talking about going to Mount Shasta in 2020, and I knew I wanted to go. And so as it evolved, as we got closer to it, the English-speaking gentleman did not want his identity. He's a professional in LA, and he did not want his identity to be revealed. And I don't know why he became so concerned about it, but so he pulled out, and it was there was no longer any English-speaking people, but Katerina Castillo ended up, by me telling her about it, she talked to the people and she got us in. And so I went. They never approved me. You were supposed to have an interview or something, but anyway, I went without their approval, and I drove from Chicago all the way to Mount Shasta because it was the pandemic. And I went, and to fast forward, I guess, to the event, the night. So the night before the people were levitated, we had our closing ceremony, and it was all done in Spanish, so I couldn't understand it. But they put rose petals on us, and we were in a circle. And during that, there's actually video of the ceremony, which inadvertently captured a white being that appeared around the circle. And yeah, and I shared that with Grant, and you can actually see Grant was able to pick up where there's a black shadow, like I don't know if it's a portal or something, but there's this bizarre thing on a tree that's near the being. Anyway, and the being appeared. It looks like a human in a white robe. It looks very similar to a statue of Saint Francis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bizarre. But anyway, so that happened, and that we didn't even know that had happened until the video was released later, and it was and they caught it. But that night, so after that ceremony, one of the guides said they had promised that we would meet either Adama. There's Adama and Antarel, and I forget which one was the first one. But anyway, it's this being in Rama that communicates with people and had shown himself to various members. But they said that if you thought you were going to meet him, you're not. They'd said that, and that we're not actually going to get to meet him, but that you've met him energetically and all kinds of stuff. So we were kind of crestfallen, but that was it. And then we were to decamp and go back to our sleeping places. But 9 people stayed back on Mount Shasta for the it was somebody's birthday
party.
Yeah, a birthday. And so they were just staying out, and they had kind of invited people at the last minute, but we weren't prepared because we didn't know that was going to be in the card. So we didn't have the stuff. So we didn't stay. And then and that was supposed to be the conclusion. But the next morning, so it was Kat and I and my boyfriend, we were in a hotel, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, these birds started crowing at our window, and very, very loudly. I thought it was someone's alarm clock. And anyway, and it woke us up, and they just were in the tree. We have video of it, a very strange thing. And then we decided, let's just go to the main cabin where the rest of the group is, and let's just say goodbye. So we decided to do that, and we did go. This is now completely off schedule. You know, the schedule is supposed to have been over. And while we were there, all of a sudden a meeting happened. And that was because the group of 9 had relayed to the woman, the other leader that was in the cabin, what had happened that night. And so in Spanish, that was being shared to the cabin. And so we're all there. It's like 30 of us. And I have absolutely no idea what's happening. You know, I'm just listening, you know, kind of listening to the sound of Spanish being spoken, but I don't understand. But there was a point during the talk where I started to tear up. I became very emotional, and I didn't know why. And even the speaker her voice cracked, and she became very emotional. And you know, and then it broke, and then all of a sudden the news was being shared to me in English, what they had just shared, which was the event of the 9. And then one person in the cabin had actually witnessed during the talk, right next to the woman speaking, it was either Antarel or Adama, I forget which one now, had appeared next to her. And we assume that was when we all felt that emotion, that very strong. So the rest of us, none of us saw him, except for that one who became very emotional and was crying hysterically for a very long time. But the rest of us just could feel him. So anyway, so that was an interesting thing. Yeah. And then they went on and they shared about the event of the 9. But so they'd been out at like around, it was after midnight, like maybe 2 a.m. They were on a park bench in Mount Shasta, a bench table talking. And then the leader had gotten a message that the being was in the woods and had invited them to go into the woods. But anyway, she didn't want to go. She was scared. And so they came across the field storming, like with a very loud sound, like an elephant stampede, because they were like, if you're not going to come to us, then we'll come to you. And so they came storming, and there was like columns of light. And anyway, there was 9 of them. And I had gotten the benefit of meeting some of those 9 during the retreat. So it was nice to have met them as humans, and gotten to feel for their energy. And then afterwards, some of them spoke English. I was able to talk to them about the experience, and some of them were younger. And one of the guys, I asked him, what was that like? And he said it was the most amazing thing he'd ever had in his life. So anyway, it's a long story, but it was very interesting.
Yeah. You've got a question about a friend of yours that has an experience with a child.
Yes, I did. So my question, and I think you've kind of answered it, but a friend of mine from school has a 9-year-old daughter who has been complaining about seeing a red-eyed being or beings in her room at night. Yeah. And her parents are divorced, and she's seen it actually at both her mom's house and her dad's house. And she became concerned about it. And the parents, I think, are even more concerned. The dad is not supportive and doesn't want her to talk about it. But the mom came to me, and I initially was telling her, oh, it's fine. It's just contact. But then I reached out to some other people, and some people said that I should go there and tell the being not to come back, that it doesn't have permission. So I just wondered if you had, I know that's a limited story. That's really all I know.
How does the child feel about it?
I think the child was concerned enough to tell her parents. But, I don't know. I didn't get to talk to the child herself. The child has had other experiences when she was younger. And she was never comfortable talking about those. So that's it. But I mean, the child is okay, I think. I was told that after I initially told the child not to worry about it, that everything was fine, that it was normal and a good thing, that the child was okay. She said, oh, okay. And she was cool.
Oh, yeah. Good. Do you think she's remained feeling that way?
Well, then I told the story that, maybe I should come over and do some kind of mentally tell the spirit that it doesn't have permission to come. And my friend stopped talking to me. The one with the daughter. Yeah, I know her husband, her ex-husband, who I also know, was very much against this whole contact thing. And he didn't want his daughter to even talk about it. So it could be, he might be interfering. I don't know. I think my friend would talk to me. She stopped reaching out to me, and I haven't forced the issue. I've just given them their space. But right. I just thought with this opportunity, I would ask the question.
Right. Well, it's certainly typical for children to have visitors in their room. I have heard about red-eyed beings. Excuse me. My voice is frogging up. Excuse me. I think the important thing is, how the child is, how the child is doing with it. And unfortunately, sometimes the parents do kind of repress the whole thing, probably because the father is frightened about it. He might have even have had experiences like that, which he doesn't want to face. That's a possibility. But this is, well, if you have a chance through the mother or any way you can have an inroad into that, it would be good to say, that many people get visited by unusual beings like that, and that it is something that the child can look into himself or herself eventually when wanted, when the child wants to do that, could find out more about it. But I think it can be reassuring to at least, the minimum is to reassure the child that a lot of people have this sort of thing happen. Yeah. And it made, that the thought of beings with red eyes, that's not a very comforting feeling. I think most people would feel very uncomfortable about that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that those beings are bad or harmful, although it would seem as if they would be. I think that would be our normal conclusion. By the way, I'd like to just mention that I have written a book for children about children's extraterrestrial experiences. And I've collaborated with an illustrator, and we called the book Kids Adventures with ET Friends in Space. It's available on Amazon and available on my website. I like people to order through my website because then I can sign the book to the person, which is, a lot of people appreciate that. But anyway, we have 18 different scenarios. They're all full page illustrations with a small caption underneath of a child speaking about the experience. So we have pictures of kids sitting on a floor playing with ET kids and hybrid kids and another Earth kid. And we have kids, pictures of a kid seeing a UFO and being taken from camping out in the backyard. And we have kids being taken by a couple of little beings through a portal, into another dimension. And a kid sitting on the, standing on the spacecraft, looking out a big window and seeing the Earth from the point of view of space and being really excited to see his home planet from out there in space, and many different scenarios that real children have reported to me, either from vivid memory or from the regressions that we have done. So here's the book.
Beautiful.
Kids Adventures with ET Friends in Space. We just quickly refer to it as ET Friends. So it's giving real scenarios from real children, and done in kind of a lighthearted way, like these. Well, and when you really think about it, these are adventures. Whether you're adult or whether you're a child, this is an unusual adventure that people are having, being taken to a spaceship. And I have found in my work that there's so much good about these experiences, even though they're very mysterious from our point of view and can be really scary until we know more about them, about what's really been going on. So this book is to open up the conversations between the child who's looking at this book and reading the captions, and any adult, parent, grandparent, babysitter, whatever, who might be reading the book or reading the captions to the child. So we want to validate for the children who are having these experiences and open up the conversation between the child and the parents. So that parent, which has just been referred to, the father who just didn't want anything to do with it, at least the mother might be able to open it up with the child.
Excellent. That almost goes back to what Max Planck said, who the father of quantum physics, where he talked about how science advances, and ufology is the same thing. It advances one funeral at a time, and it doesn't advance by convincing your opponent that you're right. It advances one funeral at a time, and the new generation is not offended with the idea. And that's so you would see that if you talk to kids today, do you believe there's ETs? Well, of course there's ETs. Do you believe there's interdimensional? Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a different world. The kids are basically going to accept that. And that's this thing where it's not a thing that happens today. It's a thing that the intelligence has been doing for 80 years, drip, 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 drip. And we're eventually at a point where the new generation, I think, will sort of accept that. I think we have one more question and then we'll shut her down here. Audrey had the question.
Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you. Perfect timing for my question. I was wondering, with all of your regressions, have you done parents and their children, and if there's similarities between the experiences?
Oh, that is a great question. Yes, in a few cases I have. In fact, the woman that I worked with more than anybody for a period of at least 11 years, maybe 11 and a half years, her son was having experiences and her niece were having experiences. And so I did mostly the regressions with the mother, but I did talk a lot with her little son. And so I knew him when he was age 4, 5, and 6, and into his 7th year as well. And he remembered consciously a remarkable amount of his experiences. And I think the reason why he did remember them so well is because he loved them. He loved the beings. He considered them almost like his family. And he was extremely fond of them and was very excited every time he had an experience and they'd come and take him. And he had a brother who was very envious that this kid was having these experiences. So we very often, heard about his experiences, and we did some regressions too with him, as well as what he consciously remembered. And then I did, many regressions, probably in total about 60 regressions with the mother. And on one occasion, the mother was taken for her own process of being a reptilian being, actually, was adding energy to her head so that she could do her healing here on Earth. And then he said, I have a surprise for you. Come with me. And he took her out of that room into what seemed to be a curved hallway. And there was her son sitting there on the floor playing with 7 little hybrid kids that he had been talking about, his space friends. So she actually got to visit him on the same ship on the same occasion, and then get introduced to his little space friends, who he had not ever thought of them as hybrids. He didn't even know about hybrids. But when she was there with them, she said, oh, they've got to be hybrids. They're very, very skinny. They're very, very pale. They have very straggly, thin hair. And their eyes are much bigger. And, and so from her little son's point of view, at age, must have been around 5 or 6 at that time, they were perfectly regular friends who he only saw on the spaceship.
Beautiful. I missed one question. Let's go to Doug quickly for a quick question and answer. Doug had his hand up and I missed it. Doug Black, is he still
Yeah, I have to unmute. Yep.
Yeah.
Hi, Barbara. We met briefly. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. We met briefly at the 2017, I think, UFO Congress. We talked briefly about John Mack.
Oh, yes, you look familiar.
Yeah, so
I remember you.
Fantastic to meet you. And I've really enjoyed reading your Meet the Hybrids book. It was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I think you mentioned that encounter with the reptilian, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, not in that book. I wouldn't.
No, you didn't. I must have read it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience in working with people who have faced trauma, both not just of an ET nature, but of earthly nature? And does the earthly nature of trauma interfere with accessing the ET encounters, the information, the memories? Do they get hindered?
Well, that's a great question. I think that they can by or more conscious trauma. However, I do still think that regression could get through that. If that's what we're focusing on that nice state of deep relaxation, which we call hypnosis. Yes, it could be brought out. I think going along in everyday life, there would be some sort of covering of the experience by the more recent awake kind of trauma. But it's all there. I mean, what I have come to understand is that every moment of everything that we have experienced is all in the subconscious part of the mind.
Yes.
Even those things that occurred to us that we were not consciously aware of at the time.
Yes.
It's all recorded. And that's why the details can come out in the regression process.
So you've had some personal success. Have you had experience with that particular instance?
With somebody who has
overcoming
on
3D trauma?
On Earth trauma. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I have.
Good. Excellent.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would just augment quickly while there's other people I think that want to talk, and we're nearing the end. That if you ever get a chance to get to Mount Shasta, where I met Grant last, it's a fantastic annual gathering, the Rama Group, and please, if you get a chance, pick up a copy of Grant's book, and that's where I met Jan, who just spoke a couple of times. Hello again, Jan. There's something that happens every year. It's a phenomenal location to go to in the world.
And what time? What are the dates? Do you know?
Typically, it's early August. Isn't that correct, Jan? And is there like one Facebook page that or someplace they can go? Because that's typically we met through Facebook. And there was usually a special page.
There's two different groups though. If you go to Mission Rama to either Enrique Villanueva's site or Ricardo Gonzalez, they have events there, and they usually run in August. And they've had a couple of events where portals open up and people go in the portals. Yeah. It's kind of, and they have no sort of there's no grays, there's no reptilians, there's nothing sort of fearful about this at all. It's a totally different type of beings that show up, and so it gives you the impression that there's all sorts of beings that are interacting with us, and and the other thing, just lastly, is when you see that, like I mentioned at the beginning, when these 9 people, when I've got this interview and we'll eventually put up with 3 of them, when they first came forward, they said, oh, well, they really don't want to talk. By the time the interview was over, they were fighting to talk with you, and everybody was trying to get their, and they had gone from, victim to messiah. They were just, they couldn't shut up about what had happened to them. So,
yes.
Anyway, thank you, Barbara, for coming on and for talking to experiencers and answering their questions. And hopefully we can do it again down the road. And we'll see you at events. You've got your books. I'll send you a copy of this, and you can do what you want with it if you want to use it for something. Put it on your YouTube channel. And I really appreciate the fact that you, almost like when Mike Clowland said, why am I here, when he's on the ship, and they said, it's time. You volunteered for this. And I think it's you and I and everybody here probably had the same little thing that we've volunteered to do. Thank you for the service that you've done, and all the people that you've helped. You've helped move the football down the field and helped bring the message that I think these beings want to the world, that we are part of something bigger. And I can't say enough about the work you've done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grant. I appreciate that. It's been nice to be with all of you, and hopefully I will be again.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for everybody showing up.